edition of Media Mashup. I'm Dean Lee, and so we've got, as usual, a whole bunch of shows, or actually a whole bunch of stories to get to. But before we get started, I have a guest tonight, and so I want to introduce Victor Lowe. And you're the head engineer, or are you the engineer on the site deck team for JPL dealing with the HoloLens?
Yeah, I'm just a senior technical lead. Yeah.
Senior technical lead. And so, all right, well, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
And later on, we'll get into all the stuff you do and working with the Mars Curiosity rover and all the stuff that's going on with that.
Absolutely.
So let's just get, because we've got a bunch of stuff to get to, let's get right to the stories and talk first about Sony. And so let me, if I can click on this. So Sony kind of made a pretty drastic decision to get rid of some of their divisions and really spinning off the audio and video divisions, and which includes the TV sets. And so Sony's obviously known for televisions and actually rather high-end quality televisions. And so they have decided that they want to move forward with the different video game stuff with the Sony PlayStation. And moving forward with that, they also are going to get rid of the Android-powered smartphones. And so it's kind of an interesting move. They're saying, in kind of another story here, in this related kind of story, and they decided that if they do this, they would see a jump by 2018 of 25% by spinning these departments off, or these divisions of their company off, and focusing primarily on video games. The most that I took away from this is they are going to focus on the PlayStation. Obviously, not any of the handheld, the Vita and all that kind of stuff. They've sort of backed away for that for a while. But it's interesting that the idea of putting sort of television sets in another division, and then they have a virtual reality.
That's right.
Mogulus or something, isn't it?
The Morpheus.
Morpheus, that's what it's called. Yeah. And have you messed with that? Have you played with their?
Yeah, we're working actually with their team, building up
you?
some applications.
Oh, okay. Is that it? I mean, we were talking earlier before the show, and you were saying that you see a way where all of these kind of a world where everybody can kind of they're not necessarily competitors. Do you see this competing with what Microsoft is?
I think they're all going to live well together in this environment. Morpheus is very much a VR device, virtual reality.
Like Oculus Rift.
And it's built with the console in mind, right? It works well with the PlayStation.
Market, right.
So it's definitely a very different market than the HoloLens.
Yeah. And so, yeah, well, I mean, they seem to be headed in that direction to focus heavily on video games. And so, but yeah, this news just came today, and so interesting that they're moving away from sort of a different, primarily from what they were doing. What was interesting, I don't know if you were following this, but they came out with these television sets that had, instead of using the 3D technology to, wear the glasses, that you would actually see two separate screens. And if we were playing a video game, one player could see, one player could, completely see full screen. And they demoed that a few years ago at E3. And it was an interesting technology. I never saw it come to market. It was kind of vaporware or whatever, that sort of idea of they showed it. And I was really interested in it because I could see a lot of applications, like in a household. Forget about video games. You could have two people watching two different, content with headphones on and on the same TV. But, we'll have to, they're not headed in that kind of direction. And so let's move on to the next story, which is, I figured since I had you on the show, I would load this up with virtual reality stuff. So Sony's getting in this game.
Yeah.
And so
heard about this?
You heard about this one, right? And so Sony, this is right. And again, we were talking before the show. So they're trying to go right after the glass market. This is Google Glass. They're trying to create their own version of it. I thought, you can see it from this picture, but it really looks like something a supervillain would wear or whatever. I mean, it has kind of a very distinct look, not as elegant as the glass. Right. But this is going to be available in March, and so for $840. And I think they said that it was 10 countries or 10 markets that they're going to first introduce us to. Have you been able to play with this, or have you seen it at all, or just?
Nope, I just heard about this one. Yeah,
you just heard about this one.
Tried
oh,
it,
okay. And I mean, I know this is crazy, but everybody seems to be getting in this game.
I know.
And so here is Apple, and so Apple filed for a patent this week, or was, I don't know if they were granted the patent or they filed it. Oh, they were granted a video headset patent this week by the trademark office. Basically, similar system. This one looks like you slide the iPhone into it, which is in line with what Google Cardboard. Where
the Samsung Gear, you got a lot of these.
There's
in the game now
this
too.
seems to be the hot topic of everybody coming out with their version of virtual reality or augmented reality. And I was hoping when we do the formal part of the interview that maybe we could talk about the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality. So VR, but this reminds me kind of back in the 90s, right? This was the hot thing where everybody had their virtual reality sort of video game. You go to the arcade and you'd walk, you'd have the headset on, and it was very kind of crude back then, but this is sort of the second coming of the
second wave.
The second wave.
Hope this one stays.
You hope this one stays? Yeah. And so that's pretty much it. So Apple, I don't know, Apple, it's kind of hard to say because Apple files for so many patents and they're granted. I mean, anytime that something comes along, just because, they file a patent doesn't mean they're even working on the product. And I'm sure that they have, things that they do from an engineering standpoint just to kind of see if they can be done, right? If they're capable of kind of pulling it off. And so, we'll have to see where they want to go. And so the next one we have in line, because we're just going right through these, is the ViewMaster. And so did you see this story?
Yep.
So this one kind of combines everything. I don't know if this is neat or interesting or, because this is a kid's toy, there seems to be parents on both sides of this. There are parents out there saying, I would not allow my kid to put this on with a smartphone that close to his face. Just because, there's issues with, can this cause eye strain or any of that kind of stuff. But it's definitely an interesting concept. It's a partnership between Mattel and Google. It's definitely born out of that Google I/O cardboard virtual headset that they handed out last year. And then there's some speculation maybe this year at I/O they will hand out the ViewMaster, the new updated ViewMaster. What I found kind of interesting about this one, this one works where you have the stereoscopic images, fusing them together, but then it also works with an augmented reality system where you have like the old discs, and those are not the ViewMaster discs and they don't go in the system. You place them on the table, and when you view the disc through the ViewMaster headset, it pops up whatever images that you have, that the disc has within it. And so, just like the old ViewMasters, this gives Mattel an opportunity to sell the units, sell the discs, and once again, you'll go to Yosemite or to
San Francisco or
wherever, and you'll have these ViewMaster discs that you buy, and then obviously get the app and hook this thing up. What do you think of?
I mean, it looks like fun. I think with the AR target is a unique thing here, right? I mean, we talked about there's all these put your phone in the device and you can have this stereoscopic view. The AR target is a nice addition. I think it's gonna be fun.
This is kind of emerging too as its own. Sort of, I don't know what you want to call it. It's a technology where they now have almost like a new sort of a pop-up book where there's some artists that have come up with the graphic novels where you download the app and as you aim it at the book, the images pop up and you can interact with them or can give you more statistical data on some of the stuff that's going on in the graphic novels. It's an interesting concept. And so this is kind of, that with the ViewMaster. And I know at JPL, you guys have an app that you can download where you put the target on there and it gives you the rover.
That's right, Spacecraft 3D.
Spacecraft 3D, is that what the app's called?
That.
And so, and then you can sort of interact with it in sort of a weird way. It looks like it's on the table.
You just print out a little card, you take your phone to it, and you see these, rover models, spacecraft models come alive in your hand or on your table.
Yeah, I know, there was a while back I saw some games that were based off of this too, where there's some simple games that you can play. And so it's interesting. I don't know I think Mattel moving forward with this, it's really going to be up to, determining whether it's successful and how much, right? I mean, it is aimed at children. And so, if this gets to be somewhat expensive, parents will shy away. I mean, I don't think they're going to pay over $100 for a ViewMaster. I don't know what they were back in the day. I think they were under 20, right?
Yeah, they're cheap.
Pretty cheap for a ViewMaster. I mean, it doesn't look like it's that complicated to manufacture, and obviously all of the electronics and everything is in the phone. So the phone is the main unit or the piece that slides in, where that's the cost involved in it.
Make some money off the discs as well, probably.
And I could see this just being a hacker's paradise, right? It's like the second this comes out, there's going to be, and some of the stuff that they do with kids' toys, you get a hacker community around there that like to mess around with this stuff. And so I could see this right away, right away, that somebody's going to come out with some ways to figure out, ways to do it. And so the next thing I did is I had a short little video from Mattel on the ViewMaster, and so this kind of explains what it is. And so let's watch the video real quick. So there's kind of their promotional video for it. And as you were saying, I mean, they showed San Francisco right there on, you'd buy the disc or whatever, and you could have some sort of fun on what there is to see in San Francisco, or kind of like what the old one. I did notice in there that I didn't before is that as you're clicking on things, and they almost have like a menu system within the disc. I don't know if this is just, their prototype, but I guess you would like, instead of sliding the thing down, that would be a way to click on whatever your, the menu system is, and so, or something like that. I mean, I haven't seen it. They showed this off at the Toy Fair in New York, and all of the demos of it were the Google Cardboard. They weren't even the actual ViewMaster. They had a ViewMaster on display for people to see it, but the demos of it or all that were literally the Google Cardboard that they handed out. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So the next story is kind of a little bit of a change. We're out of the virtual reality for a second, but this one was kind of interesting to me. So Google is shutting down something called Helpouts, and this was kind of a specialized version of Hangouts. And so what you do is you'd have like a one-on-one tutorial with somebody. It could be a guitar lesson, it could be something you want to learn. It could even be a class, and then the professor, if you wanted to ask or further go into something that's being taught. You could have a help out and literally go into like a Google Hangout, but specific for sort of learning. And there was a whole bunch of these where some of them were paid, some of them were free. But I mean, you could find a lot of stuff on there on things to learn and do. It's interesting when you find out about things when they're disappearing, right? Yeah. So it tells you right there that Google did just a horrible job of marketing this or even making people aware of it, because everybody is now aware once it's leaving. So. I don't know. It's interesting that they're getting rid of it, because the concept seems like it would be fairly popular. I mean, there's a lot of people. The DIY movement, the do-it-yourself movement's huge right now. Lots of people wanting to get involved with crafts and things that sort of make it yourself. So it's interesting. And one of the things about Google is they tend to have a lot of projects going, but every time they do this kind of stuff where they get rid of stuff, it makes people a little bit more skeptical. People don't really want to move forward with, am I going to invest in this or my time or whatever. I mean, the biggest example that really irked people the wrong way is when they got rid of the news, right? When they got rid of Google News.
The
Reader, the Google News Reader. Which was an RSS feed of everything, but it was pretty good. I mean, you could put all your stuff in there and go through pretty quickly the day's news. And there's a lot of third-party or other apps that do similar stuff, but they were definitely the primary one. What's interesting is that feature they've left around in when you have like in Gmail, you can have an alert. Right, and so if I can put all that stuff in, it really is a leftover from the reader. But yeah, so on April 20th, there will be no more. It's going to, basically be shut down. it'll be interesting because one of the things that Google is also known for is when they shut these down is to just letting them sort of the community pick it up, allowing, if the people want to continue the service or whatever and make it sort of, just an open sourced project. They do that sometimes. The other one that they did similar to this was the body one, where it was like, it was the anatomy and where you could go through and literally it was like Google Maps, but for the body. And they shut that down as well. And there was a lot of sort of outcry from the medical community on that because it was being used heavily in classrooms and things for teaching. So similar, but I don't know. So moving right along. And then, so what I do on the show is I do this thing called This Day in Tech History. And so today, on February 18th, 1983, Paul Allen resigned from Microsoft. So Paul Allen is the third. Everybody knows Bill Gates, and everybody now knows Steve Ballmer. I think people know Steve Ballmer now for buying the Clippers, especially here in Los Angeles, right? I mean, that's his claim to fame here, but he's the, one of the three that started the company. And so Paul Allen was one of the first ones to step down in 1983. And without going too much into it, he had some medical issues. He had cancer, and he now has gone through therapy and that's, he's gone into remission with that. But he, has gone on, and today he, like everybody else in Microsoft, is a billionaire and does lots of stuff within the tech world to this day. So 1983, which was early on. I mean, in 83, I'm trying to think of Microsoft. I don't even think they had Windows, right? I don't even think Windows was around in 1983. And so the next one, and I believe this is today again. So yeah, this is 1971. So the first flight of the space shuttle. And now this was just a training exercise. And so the space shuttle didn't go into space or any of that kind of stuff. But what they did is they piggybacked it on a Boeing 747. And they wanted to just see if it was flight worthy. And so this was a test just to see if it could actually fly like an airplane. And so today in 1977, the first, successful, I guess if you want to call it, this was the Enterprise. And since then, and it says in this that the Enterprise never went into space. This was just a test model for the idea of the space shuttle. And as we now know, it's, we've gone through the entire program and they've shut it down. And so the last space shuttle flights were, what, 2 years ago now?
2011?
2011 was the last space flight. So interesting. In our lifetime, we've gone through the birth and the death kind of the space shuttle program, the whole entire thing. And so this is where, and what I've done is I've spin off all the drone stories because there are just so many of them. I had to give it its own category. And so we'll get into drone news and what's going on here. And so the biggest one, and I've been talking about this, is the FAA has finally proposed the idea of what rules will govern sort of commercial drone flights. Now, for people that want to fly these as model aircraft, there are no, you just kind of got to follow whatever the city guidelines are. Most cities, it's kind of weird because we're in Pasadena, especially having JPL and stuff. There are no restrictions on model aircraft here. I've actually talked to the chief of police here about this because they banned the restricted airspace over the Rose Parade. And so I asked him about other restrictions. And in Pasadena, flying model aircraft, there's clubs that go down to the Rose Bowl, all the time and fly them in front of the Rose Bowl. But this has to do with commercial use. And so, people that want to go out and I don't know, if you, I'm just kind of put you on the spot here, but I know I was reading about stuff at JPL where they're looking at drone use on other planets, on Mars and things like that. That's got to be a pretty, difficult, I guess, a physics problem, right, of figuring out how to fly these because you couldn't just take one off the shelf and go fly it on Mars.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of math that goes into that. I mean, there's a proposal to have a little small helicopter-ish type aircraft, about a kilogram in size, to be launched with the next Mars rover. So what it'll be used for is sort of like a scouting tool. Flies around before, in front of the rover, captures some data, comes back, helps us decide where to drive the rover.
Right.
And the physics are different on Mars. I mean, the atmosphere is lighter, so it's actually feasible to think about having something small fly around.
Oh, okay. And then you have pretty intense like wind conditions and weather stuff
That's
going
true.
on though,
Yeah,
right?
so have to be careful about
Windstorms
that.
and,
Sandstorms
stuff
and
like
wind.
that.
Yeah.
And so back on here on Earth, and so they proposed. Now I talked a lot about these because there was speculation, and so they've actually relaxed some of the rules. And so now what they're proposing is instead of 400 feet, which is a little bit taller than the Statue of Liberty, they're proposing an altitude of 500 feet, so another 100 feet. Right now, I don't know. I've heard that these drones can, if you put them on a path and they have a GPS coordinates with them, they can go pretty high. I mean, they can go thousands of feet in the air. And the other one that surprised me is they're going to limit this to 100 miles an hour. That's quick, right? 100 miles an hour for a drone. I have one and mine goes 25 miles an hour. And when I have it full throttle and going across like the field over at JPL, that's fast for a little, object. So 100 miles an hour. And then the thing that's crazy about this is, okay, so you have to operate it in daylight hours. I get that one, but it has to be within the line of sight of the operator. Now, if the drone's going 100 miles an hour and it has to be within the line of sight of the operator, that creates a problem. Because I could see if you're doing the point to point, you're setting a route for these, you kind of wanted to get there quick. And our next one talks about Amazon and their proposed ideas of using these for deliveries. I could see 100 miles an hour that you would want, you're trying to get there as quick as you can. But for people that are just flying these for surveying purposes, or they're looking at these in farming, going out and using these to replace some of the light aircraft that does some of the routine stuff on farming areas or mapping. My background is partly in cartography, and so I could see a heavy use in drones for mapping purposes. No longer, I had to take a whole class on aerial photography. A drone takes care of that whole problem, right? And so, and so let's get into the Amazon one. So Amazon was upset at the beginning about the whole entire drone proposal thing, and they now say that it was not going to interfere, or that they can work around these. And they work with the FAA to figure out how to deliver packages, to people that want them. There's all kinds of problems associated with the idea of delivering goods and services with drones. I mean, we only got an hour for the show, but it isn't just getting in, or problems with aircraft if these things fail and fall out of the sky on a freeway, if they hit a telephone pole or a power line, or birds. I did a story last week on, there was a study done that birds were okay with drones, that they didn't really interfere. I can show you video after video on YouTube that shows the exact opposite of birds attacking drones one after the other. Wow. People out on, the thing that seems to be to do with these is to take them out onto golf courses and show, how great you are on a golf course with a drone and whatever. And there's just video after video of all kinds of birds attacking these drones on golf courses. And so that's an issue. So, one of the things I think is kind of crazy is, in China, they're already experimenting with delivery with drones, and it looks like we might be last in this, is allowing the regulations to go forward with delivery of drones. But, so that's, we'll have to see. And so this was one that's kind of, interesting, obviously, to me, and that was that drones using them for news gathering. And so this will obviously change the way information, especially, you could do everything from traffic reports to, breaking news. If there's a fire, you send a drone over the fire or whatever. And so the major news organizations, CNN, unspecified newspapers and other TV stations, radio stations, are looking at using, aerial cameras or whatever. And so they've gotten together with the FAA to look at regulations specific to news gathering. And the first one to do this was CNN. So CNN was granted an exception to the licensing, or they were granted licensing with an exception to this ban on commercial use. And I said this when that happened, that there's no way that the other news organizations are going to allow one organization to have this technology. They're all going to want it, and once they just open the floodgates by saying to CNN, sure, you can go out there and gather, video using drones. Every other news organization is now going to complain because it's anti-competitive. It's if you have one, you got to give it to all of them, and so, but. So and now I just want to, I have a little disclaimer here, And a lot of drone talk, there are commercial drones that are used for, let's say, civilian use, or doing things like recreational purposes or whatever, flying them for fun, or flying them just like we talked a few issues of commercial use in the private sector. There's a lot of mix-up of drones in the military, especially when it comes to arming them with weapons and things like that. I do not know what the government was thinking by releasing the rules for armed drones at the exact same time that they released, the FAA released the rules for civilian commercial use. But they did it. And so this, I just want to say, this has nothing to do with arming drones in the United States, but the government has released regulations. And by the way, a lot of these are secret, so they can't really disclose what those regulations are. But one of them is that the sales, obviously it's done through the State Department, and that that these are primarily for defense contractors and people that are dealing directly with the military outside of basically the United States. I mean, we're not going to have weaponized drones anytime soon here, with the exception, I mean, I don't want to say because you work at JPL, and what the military's drones versus the ones you'd buy at Radio Shack, unfortunately, are very different. But if you take the weaponry off of them, these are the ones that you would look for in scientific research. If you want to go out and use a drone for scientific research, this is what you're going to use as a military grade drone that doesn't have I mean, it's sort of civilianized, if you want to look at it that way. And I think that they do some of this stuff, especially in weather, gathering information on climate and weather and stuff. They do have some drones, and I'm not specifically saying JPL, but I know that there's some research that I've read about gathering information on weather patterns and things using drones. And these would all be, because they're long range. I mean, you'd have to, kind of replacing, I guess, the weather balloon. And so let's move on to, and so now we're getting into your sort of expertise. And I think you said you were part of this, or if you want to go ahead and explain what, so let me explain the story first. And so 100 people, or 99 people, have been selected, and as the headline says, to die on Mars. But to be a little bit more correct on it, it would be that there's really not any way to bring people back, right? So it's a one-way trip, just because the lack of kind of the technology to figure out how to bring people back. Now, there are ways. I mean, if you can build a sort of a return spacecraft, but you'd have to figure out how to fuel it. So you'd have to figure out how to make the fuel on the planet, right? That's,
and we're also talking about a decade down the line. So there's lots more technology that could happen in between now and then.
I mean, is it feasible to pick 100 people to do this? I mean, is the technology that?
I think their goal is to whittle it down to 24 people. So 6 crews of 4.
Oh, okay. So
this is the third round of cuts, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
So it started off with 202,000 people that applied.
Right.
And then of that, the first group, as you just said, it was 1,000 that they picked. And then they cut it down to 660. Yeah. And then the third group, which is 99 people, includes 50 men, 50 women, and 39 of them, which are from here. It says the Americas, so I'm assuming they're including Mexico and Canada. It says 33 of them are from the U.S., and 31 are from Europe. 16 are from Asia, and 7 of them from Africa, and 7 are from Oceania. Cool. And so, but sort of going back to the idea of sending people to Mars, I don't want to preempt our interview, but is this, I mean, is it replaceable if you have sort of augmented reality, or you can do science, sending a rover, but then do kind of what you do? Is it necessary to send people there? Is there an advantage to doing that?
I think, I mean, we talk about this a lot within our team, is we really want to push this idea of having the robots explore for us. Because we can send a bunch of them for a lot cheaper. And if we can build a world and environment where people can interact with Mars as if they were there, then we're really kind of diminishing this this barrier between the difference of just operating a rover on Mars as opposed to having a human on Mars. Now, obviously, I think there are things that humans can do better, as in, we should still train humans to to learn how to work in space, right? How to live in space, because that's clearly that's our next destination, right? We need to explore more. We need to go to space. But I think robots can help a lot more than we're letting them on right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because of the conditions on Mars, I mean, anybody that's going there would have to, like you're terraforming the planet, kind of. Not the whole planet, but at least making it livable for you and for whatever, people that are going to do this. I kind of don't like the idea of, as we can see in the picture, that you would spend the rest of your life living in a spacesuit. That would be somewhat of an issue, right? I mean, it's, closed quarters, but also anytime you wanted to go outside. I mean, let me just ask you this, what are the conditions on Mars? Is it hot? We know that there's a lot of...
It's cold.
It's cold.
Yeah, so it's about, on average, negative 200 degrees Fahrenheit to about 60 degrees Fahrenheit on a very hot day in an equator. Mm-hmm. So average about, negative 70 degrees Fahrenheit or so. Very cold. But it's not the climate's pretty dry. So it's kind of like a dry cold.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it'd be kind of like,
it's not snowing or anything. Yeah.
Like being on Antarctica or something, yes?
Yeah, or the Arctic or somewhere where it doesn't really snow, but it's very, very cold.
Oh, okay. So I have a short video, and so we're going to watch the video, and then when we come back, we'll get into all kinds of stuff dealing with augmented reality.
I want to go to Mars not just to be a part of history, but to inspire people around the world.
The colonization of Mars is the adventure of the century.
This is our chance to get the world excited about space again.
If we can look up from Earth and know that human beings are living on another planet, will we ever again be able to tell ourselves that there's anything we can't do?
I want to contribute directly to mankind's confident expansion into the solar system, which we have to do if we're going to survive in the long term.
I believe it is in our nature and it is our destiny.
I want, after I die, the impact of my life is imparted upon those who follow.
I know it comes at the cost of living Earth forever, but future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams.
So I was just about to say it looked like a spy thriller or some type of sci-fi movie, and then at the end they even did the coming to a screen near you. Yeah. And so, why don't you go ahead and tell us what you do at JPL? And I wanted to put Mars behind us, and so while you're talking, so then I just had to do that. So, so you're head of it's on-site team.
Yeah, so I help lead the effort that we worked with, the collaboration between us and Microsoft on this product called OnSite, which is basically helping scientists, engineers, and hopefully eventually the general public explore Mars together as if they were there.
And so let's start, they announced the HoloLens, and from what I understand, it will be available. It's going to be a commercial product. I don't know how long you guys have been using it over at JPL, but they announced it as literally as part of Windows 10. Yeah. As part of the operating system, they were saying how it's going to be, sort of cross-platform in multiple devices, and so you'll be everything from your smartphone to your desktop, tablet to even augmented reality. Right. And so, what are the? Let's real quickly. What can you do with it? I know that's kind of a broad question, but as far as you've got information coming back from, like, let's say the latest Curiosity rover.
Yes.
And then what do you do when that information comes? Like, how does this help?
Yeah, I think it helps to understand sort of the process that the scientists go through every day, right? So the images come back from the rover, and we display that to them in the mission tool. Currently, they're using this sort of just a desktop application, right? So they're looking at this warped image, sort of like what we're
doing right
looking
here,
at in the background. And you can already tell some of the difficulty is, like, how far is that rock from that rock, right? It's hard to tell.
Oh, okay.
And what direction would you have to walk to go from here all the way to the other side of the rover? And so we did a study, and it actually turns out that being inside of an immersive experience, like the Oculus or the Samsung Morpheus, the Gear, the Morpheus with the HoloLens, it really helps them understand the morphology of Mars. That provides them situational awareness of where they are and where other objects are. So basically, in general, what we've done with OnSite is we've taken all these images from different rover sites, and then we've combined them into one giant map. So the best map of Mars, of the terrain that we've ever created, with the navigation cameras on the rover, the mass cam rovers on the rover, as well as the high-res imager from spacecraft to fill in all the holes that we don't have.
And what we're looking at is kind of the high-res image, right?
Yes, these are all mass.
Like, if we wanted to know what this rock was, I can literally go into it. Just to give you an idea on how these are really high-res images, right?
That's right. These are all mass cam mosaics.
So you're using the images here
That's right.
To sort of, and then, since you're using, the HoloLens is kind of the one that they announced in that Microsoft. It's kind of interesting to people, especially this idea of interacting with your home or interacting with, your environment with it. But you're saying that you've kind of tested them all, right? It's like, do they all have their sort of, plus and weaknesses? Is there one out there that's?
Unfortunately, I don't think there's one solution for everything out there. And we've played around with, like you said, a lot of these tools, a lot of these applications to help us make the lives of our scientists and engineers more effective. Some of them are more in the robotics realm. We're working on controlling Robonaut 2, which is a humanoid robot on the space station, more effectively, right? And then that's a very different problem than walk around on Mars and understand where you are and where you want to plant science next.
Okay, and so do you have like a specialized room that you're in when you you wouldn't want to just be in your office with Mars around you, right? So do you sort of, I know that there's a testing area for the rovers, I've been to it, right? Where you go out and the sister robot or whatever to Curiosity, you can sort of, simulate kind of even the slope of some things to see how it works. Do you guys have that where now you're just adding the augmented reality to?
Absolutely. You can imagine if you had a giant space, you could literally walk around as if you were on Mars. We actually built this application targeted at the scientists' offices. So the tool actually works alongside the desktop application that I was talking about earlier. So as you're sitting at your desk, you have a cutout of your desk and your application. So we're bringing your table, your science tools to Mars. And so you can get up and walk around your office as if you're on Mars, or you can sit there in front of your desk and interact with Mars as if it was part of your environment.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So your office becomes, Mars.
That's right.
Otherworldly, if you want to put it that way.
And so for scientists, that's absolutely what they want, right? They want to walk around, we work with a lot of geologists, right? And they walk around these sites, they take pictures, they take measurements, they take out their notebook, jot down notes. And I think it's tough to tell them to sit in front of a computer screen and get all of that information from just, as a bunch of 2D images. And so I think this is really going to change the way they do their work.
So let me ask you this: when you're sort of interacting with, can the actual rover be controlled with this? Could you, in an environment, be the rover? Right now you're saying, okay, I want to do some calculations, or I want to figure out a particular, well, I don't know if you can get that detail with a mineral or rock, but you want to know a little bit about rock, you can go figure out, literally the size of it, I guess.
Yep.
Can you actually control the rover with it?
So there's about a dozen instruments on the rover, and we're going to have the ability to plan all of them. And so when we look at the planning cycle, we're looking at sort of the forward part of it. So we're going to have the scientists go walk around, make targets, make plans for where to take pictures, where to drill the rock, where to take scientific measurements. And then we pass that down to sort of the rover drivers, the engineers who make the plans for how to move, manipulate the arms, drive the robot. We're working with them, we're talking with them right now to see how we can make that a more integrated, a more broad pipeline so that they can go from a scientist picking the target to simulating it inside this immersive environment. But right now our application is just targeted at the first.
So if I'm a scientist working at JPL, I put in a request, I go, okay, I'm looking at this, I'd like the Mars rover to do this, this, and this, and then they take that to the engineering, the team that's literally manning the...
So at the start of planning day, you've got the scientists, you look at all the images that come down, they make the plans really quickly, and then they send those to the rover drivers. There's a little bit of back and forth about power constraints, resource constraints, and then they decide what to do, and then they send up the plans for the next day. And so there's this daily planning cycle that happens.
Oh, okay.
And we're just trying to maximize the potential in that planning cycle. If they can make twice as many targets in the same amount of time, then we can do twice as much science, potentially. And that's what it's exciting for us.
So how far, is this being integrated into like the next rovers that will go, that will launch?
Absolutely. So I think what we're targeting is that Curiosity is sort of a learning platform. We learn with the Curiosity operations team, learn how this can affect their world and make them better, and then hopefully target Insight and Mars 2020 down the line.
Oh, okay. And the other thing I was thinking, and I don't know how much of this, if you, as I'm talking as a geologist now, right? My background is in geology. And so it would be very interesting for me to be able to go buy the HoloLens and then somehow be able to tap into the information, just like I went onto your website and was able to download this, to be able to go and do some of the research that that you're doing at JPL on my own, almost like amateur astronomers, right? You open this up to a bunch of geologists that could go out and they could come up with solutions to things that maybe are outside of what's going on at JPL. Is this being talked about, or is this in...
We absolutely want to encourage that. This is a topic we're actively discussing about what we're going to enable the public to do and at what time. We want to encourage schools, museums, and amateur geologists out there to engage in our data sets. This data set is public, it's for the public, and we want to make sure that the public gets the most out of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because if they're making the HoloLens available to the public, then anybody can go kind of buy it. It's not something that's specific to JPL as far as the technology behind it. You're using it, and I'm sure that, as you were saying, writing the software and all this, that as making the SDK available for it, you're going to make things that are specific to what it's going to do for JPL. But in the long run, I could also, as in, somebody in the public, also tap into some of the resources that are available there.
Yeah, it's sort of in our team mantra and our motivation for building all these applications. Every iteration of these rover applications that we've written for the ground, we've built a outreach model, a version that the public gets to use. And so we've targeted that from day one. And from our sake, that makes a lot of sense, because if you're building an application that everyone can use, then of course a scientist or an engineer would have no problems using it. We definitely don't want to target sort of a really convoluted tool that they need to take training in order to use. We want to make sure they can use it in the same way that someone can go home, put this on the couch, and then take a spin.
And then the other thing that kind of comes to mind is Mars is sort of the first planet. Is there ideas of sending rovers to other either moons or other satellites, asteroids, or anything else out there that you can land on? To sort of further this?
I think the next big target we're talking about at NASA is, besides asteroids, is Europa. Right? Europa is really exciting because it's a moon of Saturn, or Jupiter. It's a moon of Jupiter, and there is more water inside of it than there is on Earth. So it's encrusted with this layer of ice. And so our goal is to sort of target sort of this torpedo into this shell of ice and then drill down into it and have this sort of submarine swim around into the oceans of Europa and see what's there. We have no idea. And so that's a wonderful place to start exploring.
Oh, okay. Are they sure? I mean, they're confident it's liquid?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, it seems like that's a pretty, you know, from an engineering standpoint, to figure out how to get a submarine onto another planet to go down and to sort of swim around in a liquid. You have no idea what it's.
It's a fun.
They do know somewhat of what it's composed of, right?
Just it's very hard. Everything we do is very tricky because you can't really build a test bed equivalent on Earth. But they are trying. They are having these sort of submersibles in the Antarctic, which they're targeting sort of as a parallel to the Europa missions.
Right, and I know that they take the rovers out into the middle of the Mojave Desert. That's where they go out and research how it's going to behave and stuff on Mars by using our local deserts kind of here.
That's right. We do our best to try to simulate it before we launch them.
And so I think that the closest you can get to the environment, if I was reading this correctly, is like the Sahara. If you have to go out to a really large body, especially when you're getting like wind features that you find on Mars, because they're so vast in the amount of sand and stuff they're moving around, you don't get that unless you're in something like the Sahara, the Gobi Desert areas that are very large.
Different parts of the world definitely. When we explore, we do a lot of testing out in the Arroyo here. And we do some testing in Arizona and White Sands, all over the place, wherever we can simulate it the best.
Right. And so let me ask you, so from the standpoint of the HoloLens itself as a technology, there's all kinds of applications that they're thinking of doing, and one of them is obviously gaming. Is there any talk of, I know at the end of the show, we'll talk a little bit about the Mars rover game where you can land the rover, but is there any talk of making available things like that, like making video games or things that the public will interact with more as this technology emerges on what Microsoft is sort of going to do with it from a marketing standpoint to the public? Is there any talk of how JPL or even the other ones, I mean Oculus or any of this virtual reality stuff that's coming out?
You mean playing like Space Invaders with the HoloLens?
In real life, I guess,
Absolutely. I think it's a great platform for just new media, new ideas. We haven't discussed specifically on our team what we're going to do in terms of entertainment, but I think that's a great, I know NASA's going to jump on board and make sure that we get into that realm, in the same way that we got on board with OnSite. Right from the start, right from the get-go, we kind of embrace the platform. We try to help the agency figure out what to do best with its technology.
Who approached who? Did JPL go to Microsoft, or did Microsoft say, hey, we got this technology? I know Microsoft has been involved in Caltech and all kinds of stuff going back to day one. I mean, they're involved with military, NASA, like I said, Caltech, MIT, all of this kind of stuff. So it doesn't surprise me, but is it something that you're given the sort of the go-ahead to say, go and look at all of these things and figure out which ones will kind of work for us? Or
I wish we had a magic key to every single company. I think we do a lot of work in terms of just networking with these companies. We built up this relationship with Microsoft, this team at Microsoft, for a number of years. Ever since the Connect age, we sort of got into the gates. We learned about the technology, and we learned what we could do with it: controlling robots, building this Mars game you alluded to, as well as a number of other applications. And so when this technology became sort of ready for developers, we sort of done a lot of tests with scientists about how we can engage them with immersive technology. We kind of came together and decided it was time to build an application. And then it became clear what to build. It was going to be sending scientists to Mars.
Okay. So that's kind of how the whole thing came about. Let me ask, I should have probably asked this before, but what is, if you were to look at virtual reality and augmented reality, because those terms are being thrown around, but they're very different from one another. They're different, but yet with the HoloLens, they're blurring the line a little bit. But what is the difference between true virtual reality and true augmented reality?
Well, to put it simply, virtuality sort of immerses you entirely in the world. So 100% of your world is a different world. For example, with Oculus, right, you put it on, you're immediately transported to a different world, whether that's Mars or a movie theater or anything else. With augmented reality, it's augmenting your world, so it's actually just adding pieces to your current world. It's not trying to get rid of your entire world, although I think at some point, really good augmented reality should support virtuality, right? If you can augment small parts of your world, then you should be able to augment your entire world to a point where you could have virtuality with augmented reality. But again, like you said, with HoloLens, they're truly targeting sort of right in the middle of this sort of mixed reality, right? A little bit of virtual assets, a little bit of augmented reality, but really just trying to add things into your everyday life.
I mean, when you have them on, since I haven't experienced it, I've only seen on online videos of it. When you have the HoloLens on, can you clearly see what you're doing? I mean, you're not going to trip over the coffee table playing Minecraft.
That's right, yeah.
You can see
You see
clearly
right through the screens, yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's like just wearing goggles or something.
It's a very different experience. It's more akin to, I suppose, like glass, right, where you see through it. Except that with glass, it's sort of just in the periphery, just a small
It's like a
heads-up display.
Right.
Whereas this is sort of all in front of you.
Oh, okay. So when you're experiencing it, like they did show the Minecraft, and they kind of put it all over the room where you're interacting. I mean, is it that well developed, or is it a little bit more? I mean, they tend to want to show these things because they have an interest in you taking notice to them. But is it as clear as that, or is it more of a?
Yeah, I think they demoed that for the media while they were there. I think they call it Holo Builder.
Yeah, but they didn't allow anybody in the room to carry a camera. You had to have in fact, they gave a tablet and a pen, and you were only allowed to write down the information, and so they weren't even allowed to use audio recorders, and so
and I think the next
so we don't know, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think besides word of mouth, it's the next experience, the next opportunity for the masses to check it out is the Build conference in April.
Yeah, and then my experience, because I did get to mess with the Oculus Rift, right? When we were at E3 last year, I did do that one, and my immediate reaction to that is you can't do it for a long time. I mean, I don't know, a lot of people have done this, but when I was moving around, I kind of got a little nauseous myself. I had to take it off after a few minutes with it. But one of the other problems that you really have that I didn't even think about until I put it on was the controller. You suddenly don't know where the buttons are, and they're telling you, like the people that are helping you through this that are like, this is the A button and here's a joystick, and they kind of put your hands on the And once you have it, it's intuitive. But if you were to put the controller down, it's hard. You suddenly, because you have no vision whatsoever of the controller.
And so, like I mentioned, that's a good point. Like I mentioned, we decided to use HoloLens because of the way that we could include the desktop in your world, right? I was talking about you could bring your desktop to Mars, and so in that way you can see your keyboard. You're not including that keyboard, and it's as if you were there.
Right, I think the computer went to sleep or something. But all right, so yeah, we lost Mars behind us. So we just have a few minutes left, and so I want to talk a little bit about I discussed some of this, but how people can get involved with what you guys are doing. And so I found this on your website under Curiosity Rover, and if you type in participate, you just have a ton of stuff down here that, everything from apps to the video game that we were discussing, and, the augmented reality stuff. I mean, there's just a ton of stuff here to get involved with if people,
and hopefully
are there any favorites?
I think the 3D spacecraft app is brilliant. I think the Xbox game is fun if you've got one of those. And of course, hopefully someday soon we'll have HoloLens Mars for the public as well.
But yeah, and when it comes out, and so we were talking about this. Some of the technology that's in the HoloLens is also in the Kinect sensor bar, or the other way around. The Kinect sensor bar, they took some of the technology and put it into the HoloLens, and I believe you can wave your arms around in front of it, right? How does that?
I think they have some type of gestures, but I'm not sure exactly what the hardware is composed of inside of the device.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was reading about it, and so they were just saying that, how some of the where you sort of map the skeleton of yourself, that it has that same sort of technology where once you're mapped, your hands now you can sort of move around. And I don't know if that was something that's in it now, or whether that's something that they're planned on, making it available. And they were showing, like, on one of the demos, they had modeling like a motorcycle, and then it was a lady, and she's putting on the gas tank and saying how it's different, and
she's using some gestures with
her hands about moving the motorcycle around and all that kind of stuff.
That's right.
And so, and then the video game that we were just talking about is the Mars rover landing, and if you go to the Xbox store, it's free, so you can download it, and like once again that uses the Kinect sensor bar. I played it, and you wave your hands around it. I think it's like there's areas on the screen, and when you do it in a certain pattern or whatever, you slow it down, and you thrusters sort of go off.
There's 3 phases to sort of simulate the landing experience.
First you enter the atmosphere with the parachute, right?
And then you blast off all the parachutes and the heat shield and things like that, and then you land sort of like lunar crater style.
Yeah, like the old Lunar Lander game.
That's right.
Right, that's what reminded me of immediately. I was like, this is a souped up version of Lunar Lander. And so, but yeah, we're kind of out of time, and so is there anything else you wanted to add, or, I mean, that was a ton of information. I definitely want to thank you for coming onto the show.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited for what the future of VR holds for us, and I'm excited to see people on Mars, whether virtually or in person.
And so, and then, that's all the time we have. And then what I'm going to do is I end the show with a video, and so if we can go through some of these, and then this is some of the team. So these are the people that I guess maybe some of them you work with, but this was a video that I found on On-Site, and so we'll end the show with that.
On-Site is a tool that we're building in collaboration with Microsoft to connect scientists and engineers with the environment of the Curiosity Mars rover. Since we can't put our scientists yet physically on Mars, a technology like this allows us to investigate what's possible if we can make them virtually present.
This was the first time where I could basically do a 360 and see Mars all around me.
I love the fact that people, when they first encounter this project, have a feeling of, wow, I've lived to see this.
Instead of looking at 2D images, they can now walk around and explore Mars in their office.
It was part inspiring and part just like, wow, I can finally do this thing that I really want to do. I get to see using this every single day.
It is a different way of exploring. That's transformational. Our plan is to deploy On-Site to mission operations this summer and to be controlling rovers on Mars with this technology in July.